Tonight I am here in the city of Newburgh at what was apparently the Woolworths building. Woolworth apostrophe S. Remember Woolworths? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a quick rundown of all the parts on a MIXTE style road bike. Start at the top. Is this the top? Highest point. These are the shifters. In this case, they are Shimano positron shifters. They are stem shifters. They bolt to the stem. Sometimes you have frame shifters bolt here. Sometimes you have bar end shifters here. Thumb shifters up here. In this case, stem shifters. These are the shifters. This is the stem, also known as a gooseneck. This is called a quill style stem because inside it has a thing called a quill, has a wedge bolt. Google that. This is the stem. Stem clamps onto the handlebars. Can't see most of the handlebars because they're underneath the handlebar grips. I don't know what you call this. Normally these are wrapped in tape, handlebar tape, but this is foam rubber. So foam rubber grips. Handlebar Grippers, as one of our local Craigslisters calls it. These are the brake levers. These are like drop-down levers on the drop-down part of the handlebar, and these are called suicide levers because apparently they don't work too well, and if you're bombing down a hill and you try to stop with these, you're committing suicide. Right here is the saddle, or the seat. In this case, a vinyl Brooks seat, or saddle. Underneath, this little doohickey, this clamp, is called the seat guts. That's what clamps the seat rails to the seat post. See, this is the seat post. Now this is the seat tube, but we'll get to that in a minute. This is the seat post. Goes from the seat to the seat guts, clamp onto the seat post. The seat post goes into the frame, and this is the seat post clamp. The seat post clamp, or sometimes people call it like the seat clamp bolt, the clamp bolt. In this case, it's integral to the frame. A lot of 10-speed bikes are like that. A lot of other bikes will have like a little piece of aluminum that's a separate clamp, but this has an integral clamp and a bolt. So, right here, this nut, this little lock nut thing, which is also a bearing race. Inside there's bearings. There's a cup here that holds the bearings. There's another cup here that holds the bearings. There's another bearing race. That is called the headset. Now this tube is called the head tube, but this is called the headset. And headsets come in different configurations, but basically all of the stuff that holds your fork to your frame is called a headset. In this case, it's threaded, it's got cups, it's got bearings, that's your headset. Now here, this is called a lug. This is a lugged frame. It's assembled with lugs. This is a lug. This is a lug. I think this is a lug. And down here, a lug. Why do they call it a lug? I don't know. Look it up. Okay. The lugs attach the top tubes and the down tubes to the head tube. This is called the head tube. Head tube, headset. And this is called the rusty cable guide, which guides the brake cable. This is a brake cable. Now the white part here is the housing. And this thing is called, I think, an adjusting bolt. And this is the actual inner cable, which is very rusty. I think this is called a straddle, this little thing here. Then we get down to the brake itself, which is a center pull brake because the cable pulls from the center. And this brake still works. Pulls from the center and the two pads go in evenly. This is the front reflector. This is the rear brake cable. This comes along and it goes through a cable guide. Here, I don't know if this is exactly called a cable guide or a cable stop. Goes to another straddle. Here's called a straddle cable, the cable that goes through the straddle hook thing. The rear also is a center pull, and the rear brake bolts onto the brake bridge, or brake plate. Now up here, you have another brake bridge, which is a little nicer, a tubular one. So you could run a different kind of brake up here if you wanted, a side pull caliper brake. Now, we've already talked about the head tube of the frame. Most frames have a single top tube that goes here or down here for women's bikes. The MIXTE style has twin top tubes, and that's what gives it its unique look. So these are the top tubes, and they go down all the way back to the dropouts. The dropout is where the axle bolts to the frame. Now there's 3 tubes back here. 1, 2, 3. This is the extended top tube. This is called the seat stay. See, because it goes from the hub to the seat. This is called the chainstay, because it goes along the chain, I guess. But on the left side, it's also called a chainstay, the left chainstay. So back up here, these are called zip ties, because they must have lost the original cable clamps. Now, here's the Tour de France sticker. I guess if you win the Tour de France, you want to brag about it with a sticker. 1977. So, these are the shifters. These are called derailleur cables. Why aren't they called shifter cables? Well, I guess they could be called shifter cables. But they run from the shifters down to the derailleurs. This is called a derailleur. It's the doohickey that shifts the gears from one gear to the next. In the back here, we have the rear derailleur. This one's the front derailleur. This one's the rear derailleur. Here's your wheel reflector. Now the way the derailleurs work is they kind of push the chain back and forth as you pedal. So you move the shifter, pulls the cable, moves this derailleur back and forth, that adjusts the chain, and moves it from one sprocket to another. These are little sprockets. And as a group, as an assembly, this is called a freewheel, not to be confused with a cassette. Cassette is a different configuration. This is a freewheel. It threads onto the hub in front of the pie plate. Why do they call this a pie plate? Because it looks like a pie plate. I don't know what it's for. Maybe to make the freewheel sound louder. Maybe to protect the spokes from the chain if the chain gets a little too wobbly. So you got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-speed freewheel, and then a pie plate. And all of that attaches to the hub. Now I'm going to go to the front wheel to explain the hub. This is a Shimano hub, low flange. This is called the flange, where the spokes go in, that's the flange. Low flange, these little ones, high flange would be a little bit bigger. So this is the hub. Through the hub goes the axle. And inside there's bearings and cones and nuts. These are axle nuts. They hold the axle onto the fork dropout, or the fork tip, which is attached to the fork legs. This is the fork leg. Now up here is the fork crown, and the crown is attached to what's called the steerer tube. So the steerer tube goes through the head tube. It's held in place with the headset. The stem bolts into the inside of the steerer tube and is held in place with a wedge bolt. So you go from the stem into the steerer tube, down to the fork crown, down the fork legs, to the fork tip or the dropout, to the axle nut, to the axle of the hub, and that's why when you turn the handlebars, the wheel turns. Now, these are called spokes. They connect the hub to what's called the rim. See this metal piece? This is the rim. Now if you take the hub, the spokes, and the rim as an assembly, that's called a wheel. A lot of people will refer to it as a rim. I need new rims for my bike. This chrome-plated metal thing, often also aluminum alloy, that is a rim. These are spoke nipples. It's funny, nipple, right? I got to say nipple in my video. These are spokes. This is the hub. Rim, wheel. The whole thing is a wheel. Now, on the wheel is a tire. This is a pneumatic tire, which means it has air inside it, and the air is held by a rubber bladder called a tube. So inside the tire, there's a tube. Between the tube and the rim, to prevent punctures from, rough edges inside the rim, there's something called a rim strip. A piece of rubber that goes around the whole rim. You can't see it. So you got tire, tube, rim strip, rim, spoke nipple, spoke, hub, axle, axle nut, dropout, and that allows you. Let me kick this thing. See? It spins a little bit. This is the valve of the tube. This is a valve cap. Now the valve itself is this thing. See if I press down on that, air will come out. Press down on my finger. Must not be much air in there. Let me see. Maybe I'll press it with a thing. Ew. It's all like water coming out of it. It's kind of gross. But in there, that's the valve inside, the valve core. This is the valve stem, which is threaded, and the valve cap goes on. It's just a dust cap. You don't need that. It does not hold the air. All right. Now, here's your, usually the frame has a sticker that tells you what kind of material it's made out of. 20-30 high tensile. Made in England. Here's the pedal. This is called a cage pedal, a rat trap pedal. You know, because I guess this is like a cage. Very common on these older road bikes. Inside the pedal there's a spindle, bearings, these are the pedal reflectors. Now, the pedal attaches to the crank arm. The right pedal goes in clockwise, the left pedal goes in counterclockwise. This is the crank arm. This is something I've never seen on any bike ever. It's like a crank arm boot. This is, what is this? The front pie plate, the chain ring protector. And this is a weird configuration that some bikes have called a front freewheel. See, I said this is a freewheel in the back. I'm not sure it is. It's more like a fixed gear. But on most bikes it's a freewheel. Most bikes do not pedal back like this. When you pedal back, the crank arms are attached to this sprocket and the whole thing pedals back. But this is a weird design that someone pioneered. So there you go. All right, let's flip it around and see what's on the other side. This part of the frame, well, let's go down from here. Here's your head tube lug. This is called the down tube. Not the bottom tube, but the down tube. This is called the seat tube. The seat post goes in there. This is called the kickstand. This is called the bottom bracket shell. And it looks like it's a one-piece shell with the lug built in. This whole assembly here, the bearings, the spindle, the nuts, bolts, is called a bottom bracket. Everything that holds the crank into the frame. This is the crank arm. This is called a cotter pin. A lot of cranks do not have cotter pins. The ones without cotter pins are generally easier to work on. They have a press fit, square taper. But this is a cotter pin in a crank. And from here you can see the back side of the sprockets, or the chain rings, attached to the crank. They're not spinning. And there's 2 of those. And attached to that is the chain. The chain goes from the crank to the sprockets to the back, and that's how you ride your bike. So that's a quick summary of all the parts on a MIXTE style vintage road bike. My apologies if I missed anything, but my battery light is flashing, so I gotta end this video now. Thanks for watching.